For centuries, human beings have looked into the eyes of cats and seen mystery reflected back. Some have believed these animals were sent only to heal us, silent guardians absorbing our grief, our loneliness, and our pain. But this view, while comforting, is incomplete. According to Edgar Cayce and the deeper wisdom hidden in the Bible, spiritual cats were never born simply to heal. They were born to mirror, to awaken, and to remind us of God's silent presence moving in the hidden places of our lives. To mistake them for mere vessels of our suffering is to misunderstand their true divine role. Think of an empath, that highly sensitive soul who feels the world's sorrow in their own body. Many assume their purpose is to heal others by carrying pain. Yet Carl Jung reminded us that the empath is not a sponge but a mirror reflecting the unconscious shadow humanity refuses to face. In much the same way, a spiritual cat does not exist to silently bear our burdens. Instead, it reveals them in quiet and uncanny ways so that we might turn to God and confront what we would rather ignore. This is why Cayce spoke of animals as channels, conduits of messages from the divine realm. Cats, with their watchful silence and unearthly gaze, often carry that message most powerfully. There is a story of a woman in the American Midwest whose husband passed away after a long illness. She adopted a stray cat that appeared at her doorstep during the darkest winter of her life. Each night, when sorrow pressed down on her chest, the cat would curl beside her, not to take the grief away, but to make it visible. She noticed that when she tried to numb her feelings with distractions, the cat would pace restlessly, even knock things over as if to call her back. Yet on the nights she allowed herself to sit in prayer, tears streaming as she whispered the psalm. The cat would rest still, its eyes half closed in what seemed like reverence. Over time, she realized the cat had not come to heal her by removing her pain, but to guide her toward facing it with God's presence. It was a mirror, a prophet in fur summoning her to surrender her grief to something greater. This is the misunderstood role of spiritual cats. They are not martyrs meant to carry the weight of our brokenness. They are signs pointing us toward healing that only God can complete. In their silence, they echo the still small voice Elijah heard on the mountain, not in the wind, not in the fire, but in the whisper. Their presence is less like a sponge absorbing sorrow and more like a lantern held up to our shadows so that we can see what lies within. It is easy to fall into the mistake of treating cats as substitutes for God, believing they themselves are healers in the ultimate sense. But Cayce warned against confusing the channel with the source. He believed that animals, especially cats, could serve as instruments through which the Creator reminds us of truths our intellect forgets. The Bible itself testifies that all creation groans in harmony with humanity's longing for redemption, Romans 8:22. Spiritual cats embody that longing. Their quiet companionship is not the end of healing, but the invitation to it. This gives us a small but profound lesson. If we see our cats only as healers, we risk placing upon them a burden they were never meant to carry. But if we recognize them as divine mirrors, we begin to see our pain not as an endless weight, but as a message, an urgent call to awaken, to reconnect, and to seek wholeness in God. The woman with the stray cat eventually said she no longer saw her pet as saving her. Instead, she realized that through the cat, God had called her to save herself by walking the path of faith, courage, and surrender. When you sit in silence with your cat, watching you from across the room, consider that it may not be absorbing your hurt, but reflecting it. That reflection is not cruelty, but grace. Like a prophet pointing to hidden sin, like a priest lifting a mirror before the soul, the cat awakens what has been buried. This is why so many who live with cats describe moments of uncanny recognition as if their pet knew a secret they had not admitted to themselves. In those moments, heaven is nearer than we think. And so we begin to see why spiritual cats were never born just to heal. Healing belongs to God, but awakening belongs to those who dare to look into the mirror He provides. The cat is that mirror, silent, yet insistent, soft, yet unyielding. To live with such a creature is to live with a constant reminder that our wounds are invitations, not prisons. The true gift of the cat is not the erasure of pain, but the courage to face it until it becomes prayer. This is the first step in re-understanding their sacred role. Beyond healing lies awakening, and beyond awakening lies the divine shadow each of us must confront. And so, if the cat has been given as a mirror, what then is it reflecting? To answer that, we must journey deeper into the mystery of the shadow itself and the divine mirror it reveals. When Carl Jung spoke of the shadow, he was not describing something evil in the cartoonish sense, but the hidden repository of everything humanity does not want to face: our fears, our shame, our disowned desires. Edgar Cayce, in his own prophetic way, pointed to a similar truth that animals, and especially cats, often carry the role of silent messengers, revealing what lies in the unseen dimensions of our lives. Here the teachings intersect. For what Jung called the shadow, Cayce might have called a spiritual message, a mirror placed before us, not to condemn but to awaken. And in that mirror, cats have long stood as guardians. To sit with a cat is often to feel an unsettling silence. Their eyes do not merely look. They pierce as if they have caught sight of something within you that you yourself have hidden away. Many people describe moments when their cat stares unblinking, and suddenly feelings of guilt, sadness, or restlessness rise to the surface. This is no accident. Spiritual cats were never born just to heal. They were born to mirror the shadow, to expose what has been buried. This is why Cayce said animals could act as instruments of the divine, awakening us to what the soul must confront. Science has begun to catch a glimpse of this mystery. Neuroscientists have discovered mirror neurons, cells in our brains that fire when we witness the emotions or actions of others. This explains why, in the presence of a calm cat, our heart rate slows and our cortisol levels fall. Yet when our cat grows tense, we too grow uneasy. The cat is not simply reflecting us biologically. It is drawing out the unconscious material we cannot see. Here, psychology and spirituality meet what science calls emotional contagion. Mystics have always known as spiritual mirroring. Consider the story of a veteran who returned home burdened with post-traumatic stress. He adopted a cat from a shelter, hoping for comfort. At first, the cat seemed restless, hiding in corners, staring with unnerving intensity. Instead of soothing him, the cat unsettled him. But gradually, he realized the cat's behavior mirrored his own turmoil, the hypervigilance he carried in his nervous system. Instead of absorbing his pain, the cat was revealing it. That recognition led him to seek therapy and prayer, where he began releasing what he had suppressed for years. In time, both man and animal settled into peace. The lesson was clear. The cat's gift was not to carry the trauma, but to hold up a divine mirror so that healing could begin in God's presence. This is why shadow work for those who live with spiritual cats can feel so intense. We are not simply looking into ourselves. We are facing what humanity itself has disowned. Jung called this the collective shadow, and Cayce spoke of generations carrying unresolved burdens that must be brought into the light. When your cat acts out in strange ways, scratching at doors, when no one is there, sitting for hours, staring into corners, it may not be random behavior. It may be a mirror pressing you to ask, what is unresolved within me, or even within my family line? What am I refusing to face? A small but important lesson emerges here. To live with a cat is to live with a prophet who will not let you escape your shadow. This can be uncomfortable, but it is not cruelty. It is grace. In the Bible, prophets were rarely welcomed because they told truths people did not want to hear. Yet their message was always aimed at return to God, to wholeness, to truth. Cats carry a similar symbolic role in our homes. They reveal not to shame us, but to point us toward awakening. There is a path, and it unfolds in stages like an inner journey mapped across time absorption. The cat feels what is unsettled around it. Reflection. It mirrors that energy through behavior. Silence or piercing eyes. Recognition. The human begins to realize the emotions belong to them, not to the animal. Separation. We learn to distinguish what is ours from what is projected by others. Integration. Finally, we bring these hidden truths into God's light, where they can be transformed. These 5 stages echo both Jung's individuation process and Cayce's vision of spiritual growth. They remind us that cats were never meant to heal by erasing pain. They are mirrors guiding us into alignment with God's order. And here lies the deeper perspective. If we ignore these reflections, if we silence the prophetic mirror our cats provide, we risk sinking further into collective denial. The shadow grows heavier. Society fractures, and both humans and animals suffer under the weight of unacknowledged darkness. But if we dare to see if we accept the divine mirror, something extraordinary begins. Pain is not removed, it is redeemed. In that moment, the ordinary presence of a cat becomes a holy signpost, pointing us back to the one who alone can heal. Thus, the misunderstood behaviors of spiritual cats take on new meaning. A sudden stare, a restless night, a quiet presence at the foot of your bed. These may not be accidents at all. They may be messages subtle yet sacred, calling you to prayer, reflection, and transformation. And so we find ourselves at the threshold of a profound question. What happens if humanity continues to ignore these signs, mistaking mirrors for mere companions? What future unfolds when we refuse to awaken? The answer will carry us into the next part of this journey, where we will confront the consequences of ignoring these divine signals and the path toward true awakening that spiritual cats and God Himself are inviting us to walk. What happens when we refuse to listen to the silent prophecy of spiritual cats? What happens when we insist they were born just to heal us instead of to awaken us? The consequence is not simply personal, it ripples outward into our families, our communities, and our world. Edgar Cayce often warned that when humanity ignores the subtle messages of creation, we drift into imbalance not only of body, but of soul. In the same way, when we overlook the role of cats as divine mirrors, we risk perpetuating cycles of denial and unconscious pain that burden both ourselves and the collective. The shadow does not disappear because it is ignored. Instead, it festers. When people dismiss the reflections their cats provide, they often continue carrying unresolved grief, anger, or shame. This unacknowledged weight leaks into relationships. Parents pass it to children. Communities absorb it through conflict, and society at large becomes fractured. Jung called this the inflation of the shadow, and Cayce described it as living outside of spiritual alignment. When we fail to notice the signs, we do not remain neutral. We descend further into what Scripture calls hardness of heart. Consider a simple but real story. A man lost his job unexpectedly and sank into bitterness. His cat began acting withdrawn, hiding in dark spaces of the house. Instead of asking what this mirrored about his own state, he scolded the cat, assuming it was sick or disobedient. Over months, the man's resentment deepened, and his cat grew more distant until it finally ran away. Only later, through prayer and reflection, did he realize the animal had been showing him what he had refused to see, that his inner darkness was suffocating not only himself but every relationship around him. Ignoring the mirror had cost him companionship and delayed his healing. The lesson is stark. To ignore the signs is to walk further into exile from our own soul. Yet the consequence is not only loss, it is also a missed opportunity. Spiritual cats, like prophets of old, are not simply exposing shadows, they are inviting us into awakening. When we listen, transformation becomes possible. The restless behavior of a cat during your grief might call you to pause, to pray, to face the sadness you have avoided. Their unblinking gaze during your anger may be a sign urging you to confess, to release, to forgive. The Bible reminds us, "The truth will set you free." John 8:32. Cats do not create the truth. They hold up a mirror until we can no longer deny it. The path of true awakening unfolds differently when we honor these signs. Instead of seeing cats as fragile healers, we begin to see them as sacred companions, pointing us back to God. Awakening means acknowledging the shadow, not drowning in it, and integrating it under the light of grace. Cayce taught that animals often arrive at precise moments in our lives, carrying a mission beyond our understanding. That mission is rarely to absorb our pain, but rather to guide us toward the spiritual maturity required to face it ourselves. This awakening has practical implications. People who accept their cat's mirror often report changes not only in their emotional state, but also in their spiritual practices. Some begin journaling their feelings when their cat acts strangely. Others incorporate prayer or meditation during those moments, treating the cat's behavior as a prompt for self-examination. Communities that share these experiences, small groups, online circles, even church fellowships create fields of collective healing. When multiple awakened souls gather, Cayce's idea of resonance becomes visible. One person's alignment strengthens another's. The awakened empath, the awakened cat keeper, does not heal alone. They catalyze change in the collective unconscious. The larger consequence of ignoring these signs is a society stuck in narcissism, projection, and division. But the reward of listening is nothing less than participation in God's great work of renewal. Every time we allow the mirror of a cat to awaken us, we add light to the collective field, weakening the grip of shadow across humanity. Awakening is not dramatic. It begins in quiet acts, choosing to face our pain rather than hide it, choosing to forgive rather than harden, choosing to live with awareness rather than sleepwalking through denial. Here lies the paradox. Spiritual cats were never born just to heal. Yet by awakening us, they lead us into the only true healing, the kind that comes when we walk with God in truth. The pain they reflect is not punishment, but invitation. Like lanterns in the night, they shine light, not to remove the darkness, but to help us navigate through it. And so, as we close this journey, the question rests upon you. What shadows in your life have you been ignoring? What signs has your cat shown that you have brushed aside? If today you chose to see them not as burdens but as mirrors, what truth might emerge? And if that truth were placed in God's hands, what freedom might follow? Take a moment now, not just to think but to feel. Let your heart consider the possibility that your cat has been more than a pet, more than a comfort. Perhaps it has been a messenger, a divine reminder, a living parable of awakening. If this reflection has stirred something within you, do not let it pass. Allow yourself to pause to pray, to connect with your soul, and to honor the signs given. And if this message resonates, I invite you to like this video, subscribe for more spiritual insights, and share your story in the comments. Because when we awaken together, guided by God and reminded by the silent prophecy of cats, we step not only into personal healing, but into the collective awakening this world so desperately needs.